Sometimes, preserving friendship is more important than seeking a love you don't deserve. On a winter night, as the snow blanketed the ancient rooftops of the houses in Notting Hill, Emily Carter sat alone by the window. She curled up in a thick scarf, her cup of tea cold. She didn't even realize when it had cooled. Outside, the golden lights cast a cold and distant glow on the wall. She picked up her phone, a habit she had grown accustomed to. A message popped up from her mother. Nathaniel is getting married. Claire, the girl who teaches at the old church, they're getting married next month. Her hand fell limply. The phone dropped onto the thick carpet beneath her, but she didn't notice. A cold numbness seemed to spread through her body. Claire. The name, light as a cloud, pierced Emily's heart like a sharp knife. It didn't hurt immediately, just a slow, biting cold. She closed her eyes, and memories between her and Nathaniel flooded back, so vividly she could almost touch them. Emily Carter had always believed that the summer afternoons of her childhood in the suburbs were the one thing in the world that would never change. There, the wind blew through the tall grass fields, carrying the earthy smell and the warm golden light of the evening sun. There, she and Nathaniel Brooks, the boy next door, would cycle around the lake, argue over the last apple, or lie on their backs in the grass, watching the sky change color and imagining that cloud shaped like a dog could bark. They were best friends. At least, that was how Nathaniel saw it. As for Emily, her feelings had long grown beyond friendship. It wasn't the fleeting emotions of a young girl, but something deeper, more persistent, enough to make her remain silent for years, because she feared that if she spoke, it would all vanish, like the last dust of summer sunlight. At 18, Nathaniel received a full scholarship for business administration at Columbia. Emily also got into a prestigious university in London, but her heart never left the white fence and the wooden attic where they used to sit and read until late at night. "Congratulations," she said, when Nathaniel shared the good news. Her voice was as light as a breeze, and her smile was nearly perfect. "But I'll miss you." He gently touched her shoulder. "A lot." Emily simply nodded, and kept hundreds of words inside, unable to speak them. Time passed like an instrumental piece. Emily stayed in London for 6 years, completing her master's, working as a researcher, and then teaching at a university. But she never returned. Not because she didn't miss him, but because she didn't dare. Soon after, Nathaniel married Claire, the girl who taught at the small church Emily used to visit during Christmas. Claire, a woman whom, if you passed on the street, you wouldn't turn back to look at. A kind face, a soft voice, and a presence as gentle as wildflowers. But it was that simplicity that gave her what Emily had never touched, Nathaniel's heart. He loved Claire slowly, peacefully, like a wordless love song that anyone could hear, but no one could replace. Emily knew that well, and because of that, she chose not to return. Until one day, her father, Thomas Carter, called. "Your mother and I want you to seriously consider coming back. Carter and Fields needs a successor. If not you, then who?" Emily was silent. On the other end of the line, she could hear the rhythmic tapping of his fingers on the desk, a habit of her father whenever he lost patience. "I've heard you. I'll come back." Not because of the company, not for power or fame, but because of something she had never spoken. For a figure, now a husband, a CEO, but still Nathaniel from those golden afternoons on the grass. The day Emily set foot back in New York, the weather was cold and gloomy. The airport was like a cold maze of wind and people. She dragged her suitcase through the hallway, took a deep breath. The smell of coffee and cigarettes mixed together, nothing special, but to her, it all reminded her of something very old. She didn't call Nathaniel, didn't give any notice. She simply returned to the city where everything had once started and ended. 3 weeks later, Emily sent a job application to Brooks Industries, Nathaniel's company, using her full birth name with no introduction or mention of any connections. She turned down the position of strategic director at Carter & Fields, despite fierce opposition from her family, especially her father. She turned down power. She turned down admiration. She wanted to start over as an ordinary employee, as a small part of the world of that man. On the day of the interview, she walked into the towering glass building in the heart of the city. Her heart raced, not because of the job interview, but because she knew she would meet him again. And then, when the office door opened, Nathaniel looked up. In an instant, his dark brown eyes widened. "Emily?" She smiled. The kind of smile she had spent years learning. Just familiar enough. Just distant enough. "I'm back." He stood up, walked over, unable to hide his surprise and joy. "Oh my God. You've really changed." "And you're still the same," she replied. Though unspoken, there was something in Emily's eyes that made Nathaniel pause. He couldn't quite name it. He just knew that, from that moment, something within him had shifted from its original course. That afternoon, Claire was watering the flowers on the balcony of their penthouse apartment. A message from Nathaniel appeared. "Do you remember Emily, my best friend? She just applied to the company. I think we should hire her." Claire stared at the phone screen. Of course. She remembered. Emily, the long-haired girl who always smiled, the one who used to sit behind Nathaniel on his bicycle every afternoon after school, the girl who had sent him handwritten letters from London during the first 2 years of college. Claire wasn't jealous. She had never been the type of woman to doubt. But this time there was a strange feeling creeping into her heart, like a song with a wrong note, very small, but enough to make the melody feel incomplete. That evening, in the 18th floor apartment overlooking the city's dazzling lights, Emily opened the window. The night breeze swept in, carrying with it old dreams and unspoken words. "I'm back, Nathaniel," she whispered to the darkness. "And this time, I won't stand behind anymore." In the early days of working, Emily integrated quickly. She was intelligent, sharp, and had a very unique confidence, not loud, not showy. Every time she spoke in a meeting, she looked directly at Nathaniel, as if speaking only to him. Other employees began to whisper about the new, beautiful, and somewhat unpredictable director, about the past between her and Nathaniel. Claire heard it, even though she didn't want to. One Thursday evening, Brooks Industries held a small party after a successful deal. Claire attended with her husband. She wore a simple black dress, her hair neatly styled, and her gaze as gentle as ever. Emily arrived late, walking in wearing a minimalist but elegant red dress. All eyes seemed to pause for a moment. She walked straight to Nathaniel and Claire, smiling. "Hello, you two." Claire stood up and shook her hand politely, offering a smile, a proper smile. But inside, one question echoed clearly. What is she here for? Among the crowd, Emily stood next to Nathaniel more than necessary. Every conversation between them seemed to have its own world. Claire simply observed silently. No accusations, no interruptions. That night, when Nathaniel was in the shower, Claire stood in front of the mirror for a long time. She looked at herself. Tired eyes, slightly sunken cheeks, skin deprived of sleep. She wasn't young anymore, and she realized she was scared. The next morning, Claire woke up early to make waffles, Nathaniel's favorite. When he came downstairs, she was busy in the kitchen. The smell filled the space. "You're up early?" he asked, kissing her on the hair. "I wanted to do something for you. You've seemed busy lately." Nathaniel sat down, took a sip of coffee, and said, "Emily and I will have to go on a business trip to Boston next week, the branch expansion project." Claire placed her spoon down lightly. Her voice didn't change. "Can't you choose someone else?" Nathaniel, her. Then he smiled faintly. "It's just work, sweetheart. Besides, Emily is very good." Claire nodded, but inside, a warning sounded clearly. "If you don't step back, she will step forward." That night, when Nathaniel had fallen asleep, Claire opened her laptop. She typed into the search bar, "Emily Carter." The results came up, a series of articles, academic achievements, an interview with Forbes UK, 30 under 30 list. She's good, really good, and beautiful, and has a history with Nathaniel. Claire closed the laptop. In her heart, the anxiety was no longer an ambiguous fear. It was something real, something clear, and it was drawing closer. In the following days, Emily poured all her energy into her work. She became involved in important projects, came up with creative ideas, and gradually earned the trust of her colleagues. But with Nathaniel, every conversation between them was not just about work. Every time Emily walked past his desk, she would accidentally, or perhaps pretend to accidentally, brush her hand lightly on his shoulder while handing over documents or just to chat. She knew Nathaniel would never object, but every time she felt something strange stirring within her. Her heart would skip a beat, while Nathaniel would pause slightly, as if trying to suppress something within himself. There were times during meetings with many people when their gazes would inadvertently cross uncontrollably. When she sat too close to him, her eyes could no longer hide anything, as if wanting him to see something that hadn't been said. Each time, the atmosphere around them would thicken, as if time had stopped. And then the meetings would stretch a few unnecessary minutes, just so they could remain in the quiet space together. There was nothing clear, but Emily could feel it, and she didn't want to back away. One late night, when the office was almost empty, Emily walked into Nathaniel's office. The only light came from his desk lamp, casting a soft glow over the darkened space around him. Nathaniel sat still, completely focused on his computer screen, but Emily knew what he was thinking. She stood at the door for a long time before quietly calling out, "Nathaniel?" He looked up, his eyes tired but still carrying the familiar warmth. "You're not leaving yet. It's late." Emily smiled gently and walked closer to him. She could clearly feel the tension in the air, even though he said nothing. A strange sensation filled the room. "I just wanted to finish my work. Thank you for giving me this opportunity." Nathaniel nodded, not saying more. But suddenly, in this moment, all the emotions that Emily had buried deep inside for so long flared up fiercely. She couldn't hold it back any longer. "I love you, Nathaniel," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. The words came out as a confession she had avoided for so long. Nathaniel stood still, his eyes wide open. But there was no immediate reaction. Silence filled the room, as if time had stopped. He sat there, his hands gripping the table, his shoulders tense. "I love you," Emily repeated, her voice stronger. "I've always loved you." He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched on as if everything had suddenly frozen. Finally, Nathaniel shook his head gently, his voice low, as though it took great effort to speak. "Emily, I have Claire. I can't, and I don't want to hurt her." Emily stood there looking at him. Her eyes were resolute, without regret, with no fear in them. "I'm not asking for anything," she said, gently but firmly. "I just wanted you to know." Nathaniel looked at her for a long time. His gaze was unfamiliar, conflicted. Part of him wanted to say something, that he understood, that he didn't blame her, but all he could bring himself to say was a rejection full of sorrow. "Emily," he sighed, as if battling his own emotions. "We can't do this. You deserve a full love, not one that's shared like this." They both stood there, silent. While Nathaniel spoke, Emily could clearly feel the pain in his voice. But at the same time, her heart kept pounding. She understood. The so-called rejection wasn't the end, but merely the beginning of a bigger storm. Nathaniel turned away, looking out the window. Outside, the city lights sparkled and reflected through the glass. But inside him, everything seemed blurred. Emily stood still in the dark, saying nothing more. She could feel the distance that could never be erased. But she knew this wasn't the end of the story. A part of her had dared to speak her feelings, knowing they would never be returned. But at least they had been spoken. And that was the freedom she had been searching for. Emily stepped out of Nathaniel's office, her steps light but her heart heavy. Each step seemed to stretch twice as long, as if she was crossing a threshold but didn't know what lay beyond it. When she glanced back, Nathaniel's shadow was still visible on the window, like a vague figure that couldn't be erased. That night, she returned to her room in a small hotel near the city center. The room was nothing special, with only dim lighting, a neatly made bed, and a view of the bustling streets from the window. But in that space, silence filled the air. Emily sat on the bed, staring into the darkness, her heart in turmoil. She wondered if she had done the right thing. Was it foolish to let her feelings be known like that? She had prepared herself for rejection, but somehow, when she heard Nathaniel's words, she still felt an emptiness rise in her chest. "I love Claire. I've built a peaceful life with her," Nathaniel thought. "And Emily is just a part of the past, an old friend that I cannot love." But why, when he said those words, did Emily feel the pain in his voice, as if he was struggling with himself? The next morning, Emily woke up earlier than usual. She stepped out onto the balcony, took a deep breath, and let the morning breeze caress her face. The city below her, with its busy streets and hurrying taxis, hadn't changed at all. But inside her, everything seemed to have changed forever. She knew she couldn't retreat anymore. She had entered this world with the resolve not to back down, not to let Nathaniel turn away so easily. But did she have the strength to face his silence? The absence of the love she had always longed for? As for Claire, she could no longer remain silent. The strange feeling, like a lingering anxiety, had been growing inside her for some time. She could clearly sense the change in Nathaniel, but she couldn't explain why. Each time he looked at her with an increasingly distant gaze, each time she felt left behind, she knew something had shifted in their relationship. The distance between them was growing, even though she couldn't pinpoint any specific reason. One evening, after dinner had ended, Claire looked at Nathaniel with a determined gaze. No more ambiguity, no more pretense. Her heart now had only one question. She needed to know the truth. "I'm not blaming you," she began, her voice soft but firm. "But I need to know, does your heart still truly belong to me?" Nathaniel looked up, his eyes momentarily surprised, then grew serious. He remained silent for a long time, as if searching for the right words to answer the question Claire had just asked. "Emily is just a childhood friend. I've never thought of her in any other way," Nathaniel replied, his voice calm and steady, as if trying to reassure both of them. Claire didn't answer right away. She simply nodded lightly, trying to swallow the sadness rising in her chest. His words didn't comfort her. They only created an invisible crack in her heart. She had heard these words too many times, but this time they didn't mean anything anymore. "I understand," she whispered, then stood up, turning to walk away. But inside her, a growing fear filled her. Did Nathaniel truly feel nothing for Emily? She didn't know, but she could feel the difference in him more clearly than ever before. On a drizzly evening, when the rain gently covered the rooftops, Emily called Nathaniel. Her voice on the phone was weak, trembling. "I'm not feeling well. Can you come, just for a little while?" Nathaniel hesitated, his gaze resting on the window, where raindrops clung to the glass, shimmering and forming endless streaks. He knew he shouldn't go. He knew Claire wouldn't be happy. But he couldn't shake the feeling that Emily needed him, as if all the emotions that had been simmering inside him for so many years were now focused on one place. "I'll come," Nathaniel replied, his voice low and filled with conflict. When Nathaniel arrived, Emily's room was eerily quiet. The dim light in the corner of the room cast long shadows on the walls. Emily sat on the couch, hugging a pillow, her eyes red as if she had been crying for hours. She didn't want him to see her so vulnerable, but everything had reached its limit. When Nathaniel stepped in, their eyes met. No words were spoken, only silence enveloped them. Emily stood up, unsteady, walked toward him, and collapsed into his arms as if there was no other choice. Nathaniel felt awkward. He didn't have feelings for Emily, at least not in the way she hoped. He had always seen her as a close friend, like a sister. But at that moment, she was in his arms, and the familiarity of it made it hard for him to refuse. Just then, Claire opened the door. Her eyes widened, unable to believe what she was seeing. In that instant, everything seemed to stop. The space around them fell into an overwhelming silence. The unresolved emotions that had been building up for so long shattered before her eyes. Claire couldn't stay any longer. She turned and walked away, her heart torn into pieces. No tears fell, but the pain inside her was undeniable. Nathaniel ran after her, but she only walked faster, her heart shattering with every step. He didn't know what to say. He just stood there, his eyes vacant, unsure of how to explain to Claire that everything she had just seen was a misunderstanding. "Claire, don't go," Nathaniel called, his voice filled with helplessness. But Claire didn't turn back. She couldn't bear it anymore. That night, Claire left the house without a word. Nathaniel knew she needed time to think, but he couldn't guess what would happen next. His actions had hurt Claire, and he couldn't forgive himself for it. Nathaniel sat in silence in his office, the dim light casting shadows on the cluttered thoughts in his mind. His feelings for Claire and Emily had drawn him into an endless battle, a battle he couldn't escape. But everything was becoming more and more blurred, and Nathaniel felt as though he was standing at a crossroads with no way back. He had failed to see the truth about Emily, letting her overpower everything. Nathaniel couldn't be at peace with himself, knowing that what he had done over the past months had caused Claire so much pain. He needed to understand what had truly happened, and finally, he decided to turn to Michael, the only friend he could seek advice from. One afternoon, Nathaniel met Michael at a quiet cafe, a place where the atmosphere was calm and the rush of life seemed far away. Michael was already waiting, looking at Nathaniel with the gaze of an older brother, a friend, and a life companion. "Michael, I need to understand what has happened," Nathaniel began, his voice low. "I feel like I've let everything go too far, without realizing it. The situation with Claire, Emily, and me, it can't go on like this anymore." Michael sat across from him, not rushing to answer. He looked at Nathaniel, understanding the worry in his friend's eyes. After a brief silence, Michael spoke, sharing the thoughts he had kept to himself. "Emily isn't innocent. She didn't join your company just to work. She did it to get close to you. She's always seen Claire as an obstacle in her life. Nathaniel's heart felt crushed upon hearing this. Michael's words hit him like blows to his reason. He couldn't imagine that Emily, someone he had always considered a friend, could treat Claire so poorly. Guilt and helplessness surged within him. Michael continued, his gaze fixed on Nathaniel. Emily never respected Claire. She's always looked down on her and challenged her. Claire doesn't deserve that. She's given her heart and life to you. Nathaniel went silent. Michael's words like a painful slap to his awareness. He began to realize the truth he had tried to deny for so long. Emily didn't love him the way he thought. She had been using their relationship to satisfy her own ego. He also realized that all this time, Claire had been suffering in ways he hadn't noticed. "How much has Claire had to endure?" Nathaniel whispered, his voice choking. "I've overlooked it all. I've made her live in lies and ambiguity. I can't forgive myself." Michael didn't respond immediately, but his understanding gaze was clear. Finally, he spoke. "You need to face what has happened. Claire deserves an apology from you, and you need to say what you've been avoiding." Nathaniel couldn't stop thinking about what Michael had said. He understood that if he didn't face Claire and apologize, nothing would heal. He had wasted too much time, and Claire didn't deserve to continue enduring this pain. Marriage wasn't always easy. Sometimes we had to fight for what we believe is right. Claire thought it was time to stand up and protect the happiness of her small family. The next day, Claire arranged to meet Emily at a small cafe. The tension in Claire's heart was inevitable, but she knew she had to face the truth. She couldn't continue living in silence and fear. When Claire entered the cafe, Emily was already sitting at the table. She looked directly at Claire, not avoiding her gaze, and in that look, Claire saw a strange determination. Claire sat down across from Emily but didn't speak right away. There was no hostility, no sorrow, just a prolonged silence, like a space that needed to be filled. Finally, Emily spoke first. "Nathaniel deserves a better woman, someone more beautiful, more capable. I think you should step aside. He loves me." Claire wasn't angry, wasn't upset. She looked at Emily calmly, as if she had already prepared herself for this confrontation. "I may not be perfect, but I've never had to resort to tricks to be loved," Claire said gently, her voice neither high nor low, just a simple and strong declaration. Nathaniel had learned about this meeting from Michael. He listened to the entire conversation between Claire and Emily, and in that moment, everything became clear. He realized that Emily hadn't come to him just for work. She had her own agenda, to intrude on his family's happiness. The emotions that had been building up inside him burst forth, and he could no longer stay still. Nathaniel rushed out of the shadows and stood before Claire. The light in the room slowly dimmed as Nathaniel gently but decisively walked forward. He no longer had a second chance to fix the mistakes he had made. This was his last moment to face the truth and apologize. He knew that, although he couldn't heal everything, at least he had to do the right thing in this moment. "Claire!" Nathaniel called, his voice gentle yet firm. "I know I was wrong. I didn't see things clearly, and I've hurt you. I'm sorry for everything that's happened. I can't forgive myself for making you suffer." Claire didn't respond immediately. She stood still, her eyes sparkling with an undeniable pain she could not hide. Nathaniel's apology, though sincere, couldn't immediately soothe the hurt inside her. After a long moment, she finally spoke, her voice calm but betraying the anguish within. "I love you, Nathaniel," Claire said, her lips trembling, but her gaze steadfast. "And I need to protect our family's happiness. We can't go on like this." Nathaniel heard those words, and his heart tightened. He understood that, no matter how much he regretted it, the price to pay was a loss too great. Claire had endured so much, and she had lost her trust in him. She could no longer live in that ambiguity and pain. "You deserve to be loved and cherished, Claire. I hurt you, and I am so sorry," Nathaniel said, his voice choking. "I love you, but I didn't realize it until it was too late." Claire looked into his eyes, saying nothing more. She understood that these apologies couldn't heal all the wounds, but at least Nathaniel had recognized the truth. Part of her couldn't forgive him immediately, but she also knew that admitting his mistake was the first step for both of them to find harmony, though that path wouldn't be easy. She nodded slightly, saying no more. What had passed could not be erased, but she didn't want to harbor any more hatred. They stood there in silence, as if they had said all that needed to be said. For Nathaniel and Claire, the road ahead was still long. They couldn't turn back time, but at least they had faced the truth and realized that love truly requires mutual respect and understanding. They would continue their lives, each having to find their own path to heal their wounds. As for Emily, after everything that had happened, she began to realize that love wasn't something that could be seized. It had to come from both sides. She realized that what she had done, forcing Nathaniel into a relationship he didn't want, had caused her to lose the friendship between them. She hadn't just hurt Claire, she had hurt herself as well. With a hollow heart, Emily stalked, wondering, sometimes, preserving friendship is more important than seeking a love that you don't deserve.